Imagine this. You are a wealthy Roman citizen. You have a villa with a fountain. Slaves bring you wine. And in the bathhouse there's warm steam and gossip about the latest scandals. Everything is going well. But suddenly, boom, your money is devalued, banks are closing, and your senator friends are already panicking, running around the forum like lost chickens. What happened? It's simple. Rome orchestrated the first real banking crisis in the history of mankind. And this isn't just an economic drama, it's a lesson for the ages. Today, we'll explore how the greatest empire in the world, which stood on swords, roads, and aqueducts, fell on its own money. Yes, even Rome had its own mortgage bubbles, pyramids, and liquidity. Only instead of bitcoins, there were sesterces. Instead of banks, there were taverns with exchange operations. And instead of crypto enthusiasts, there were greedy senators ready to sell their own mother for a couple of provinces. But let's start from the beginning. To understand how Rome fell into an economic pit, you first need to understand how it stayed afloat in the first place. The Roman economy was like a giant culinary experiment. You add a bit of conquests, a pinch of slaves, half a liter of taxes, and voila, you get an empire that lasts 1,000 years. But just like in any kitchen where you don't watch the fire, everything can burn down. The Roman economy was militaristic in nature. Everything was built on conquests. Every year, new lands, new resources, new slaves, and with them came new money. But here arises the first big mistake of empires: dependence on external growth. What does this mean? Imagine your income depends solely on how much you can conquer. But what if there are no enemies left? Or they start resisting? That's when it happens. Income dries up, but expenses remain the same. Moreover, the Roman Empire was not just a country, it was a giant corporation with branches throughout Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And, like any large corporation, management problems began. Senators were like shareholders, only thinking about how to pocket more. And the emperor, well, kind of like a CEO, only with a constant legitimacy problem and a tendency for dramatic deaths. Let's get back to money. In Rome, oddly enough, banking operations already existed. People deposited money for safekeeping, received interest, and took loans. Just like us, only without a phone at hand, with the risk of being poured molten lead on you if you didn't repay the debt. And this is where it gets interesting, how these banking operations led to the first collapse in history. Everything started when Roman bankers, well, or how do you call them, argentieri, began giving out loans too easily. Why check if a senator can return the money if he promises to share power? This is how the first version of the mortgage bubble of antiquity appeared. Loans against future taxes, lands, and even against amphitheaters. And then, boom, war, crop failure, uprising, and all promises turned to dust. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real catastrophe began when the state started printing money like crazy. Not literally, of course. In Rome they minted coins, but the essence is the same. To pay the army, road construction, and the PR campaigns of the emperors, more and more coins entered circulation. But the trouble is, their value quickly fell. At first, a little bit, then, like an avalanche, emperors began minting coins with less and less silver content, but still called them precious. It's like if you sold water at champagne prices until the first tasting. And here it is, the first banking crisis in the history of mankind. People lost trust in money. Bankers went bankrupt. Senators started selling their villas. Emperors fled or died. And the people, well, the people, as always, just suffer. And understood nothing except that bread had become 100 times more expensive. So, friends, we stopped at how Rome started printing money like a baker bakes bread, only with much less quality. And, as usual, when the state starts issuing more and more money that is actually worthless, inflation occurs. But what is inflation for a simple Roman? Well, imagine that yesterday you bought a loaf of bread for 1 coin, and today, you already need 10. And tomorrow, you'll need a whole bag of coins to buy a piece of cheese. So, money depreciates, and prices are like a roller coaster. And all this is without GPS to even get oriented. Of course, the Romans also noticed the problem. But instead of coming up with a control system, They started tampering with the coin composition, a silver coin. Of course, that the silver in it is like snowflakes in the desert, and it was still called precious. It's like economic magic. It's not gold, but we'll say it is. Interestingly, Rome is not alone in this. Modern countries also love to play with money. Only instead of hammers and anvils, they have central banks, interest rates, and tons of economic theories. But the essence is the same. If you issue more money, and there are grounds for, trust disappears faster than a politician after elections. And trust is like air. As long as it's there, everything holds. But the moment it disappears, panic begins. That's exactly what happened in Rome. People stopped trusting coins. And if so, why hoard them? Why keep savings in the bank if tomorrow they might be worth twice as little? And here come the Roman bankers, Argentari. They weren't just money changers. They were real financial geniuses of their time. They gave loans, stored savings, even organized international transfers. And if you think this was all in some ancient decline, no, it was a real banking system, just without computers and with the risk of being stabbed during a bad deal. But even geniuses have a weak spot, and for Roman bankers, it became excessive risks. Apparently, they thought, the emperor promises gold, so there will be gold. The senator swears, so he'll return it. And if not, well, we'll wait a bit longer. So it happened. Loans without guarantees, assets without value, and hope instead of capital. Everything was going well until the first major bankruptcy occurred. One fine day, one of the most famous Roman bankers, I won't name him, but historical sources list him as the one who lost everything, couldn't return the money, and not just couldn't, he simply dissolved, like sugar in wine. And others followed him, one after another, like dominoes. People who were rich yesterday are poor today. And those who kept money in the bank could now only watch as their savings turned to dust. And all this was without TikTok to somehow express their pain. But the most interesting thing is how the state reacted to this. Instead of bringing order, introducing control, or at least starting an investigation, the Roman authorities simply closed their eyes and hoped everything would pass. It's like if a ship's captain, noticing a hole in the hull, started singing the anthem and hoping the water would go away on its own. And here the crisis intensifies. Banks fall one after another. People lose their savings, money, of value, and the state was busy building even more statues of itself. Apparently, the emperor thought, if I stand on a column, it means everything is under control. But enough drama. In the next part, we'll talk about how politics and the economy became intertwined in a deadly knot, why Roman senators were like modern oligarchs, and how one simple mistake led to the collapse of the entire system. Well, friends, let's continue our journey into the depths of the Roman economic catastrophe. And if you thought it was all about money, no, the real problem was politics. Because in Rome, the economy and power were sewn together so tightly that even imperial scissors couldn't separate them. Imagine this. You are a senator. You have villas, slaves, and a pile of money. But you want even more. What to do? Well, for example, give a bribe to get a province. Or maybe borrow a large sum from a banker to arrange grand games in the circus and thus win the love of the people. Just like us, only without PR managers and with the risk of being poisoned by your own brother. And here is where it gets interesting. Roman politics was like poker for beads, only the stakes were millions of sesterces, and the bluff was the lives of ordinary people. Senators, who were supposed to maintain order, were destroying it themselves. Who was the first to take loans against future income? Who was the first to manipulate money? Who was the first to falsify reports? All this led to the fact that state finances turned into chaos, and when the state cannot meet its obligations, a default begins. It's like if your phone suddenly stopped working because you forgot to top up the balance. Only in the case of Rome, it's millions of people, an army, and an entire empire. Interestingly, default in Rome was not a one-time event. It happened over and over again, like seasonal rains, only instead of water, debt receipts, instead of an umbrella, hope, and instead of a rainbow, ruined banks. But the most frightening thing is the loss of trust, because when people stop trusting money, banks, and even the state, the system collapses. It doesn't matter how much gold you have in the treasury or how many victories you have in Gaul. If there is no trust, there is no economy. And as we know, trust is built over years and lost in a day. And in the case of Rome, there were several such days. One of the most vivid was the reign of Emperor Nero. He not only set Rome on fire but also devalued the currency to pay for the restoration. And then he started persecuting Christians. But that's a different story. And here we come to the main mistake of empires: confusing personal gain with the public good. Apparently, the Roman elite thought, if I am rich, then the country is prospering. But in reality, it was the opposite. The more they plundered the treasury, the weaker the empire became. And the weaker the empire, the more external threats there were. And the more threats, the more money was needed. And where to get it? Right? Print even more coins. And everything starts over again. It's like a vicious circle, only with swords and coins. And if you think such things are only possible in ancient times, no. Modern countries also fall into the trap of national debt, inflation, and loss of trust. Only instead of chariots, they had economic sanctions. Instead of triumphal arches, television debates. And instead of gladiators, traitors. But let's get back to Rome. When the system began to collapse, a banking crisis became inevitable, because when money loses its value and loans are not returned, banks simply cannot continue operating. And now it's not one, not two, but whole banking houses are collapsing, like card terminals on payday. And with them, the hopes of ordinary people collapse. Those who saved for old age, those who took out a mortgage for a villa, those who just wanted to live peacefully and not be afraid that everything would change tomorrow. But in Rome, everything always changed, and almost never for the better. Interestingly, at this moment, the state not only did not help but exacerbated the situation. Instead of introducing control, supporting banks, or at least calming the population, the Roman authorities began a witch hunt for scapegoats. They blamed bankers, officials, foreigners. And the real reasons? The real reasons were hidden under the carpet, like a dragon in a children's room. Enough drama. In the next part, we'll talk about how the Roman economy influenced the whole world, why modern crises are just a repetition of old mistakes, and what lessons we can learn from this history. Well, friends, let's continue our journey through the ruins of the Roman economy. And if you think this was all somewhere in the distant past, no. What happened in Rome influenced the entire world history, because economic laws are universal, and if you violate them, there will be consequences. Whether in the 1st century or the 21st, the Roman Empire was the first global economy. Yes, exactly. They had trade connections from Britain to Mesopotamia, money, loans, international transfers. All this already existed. Only instead of SWIFT, there was a network of trust between merchants. Instead of dollars, gold and aurei. And instead of cryptocurrency, the emperor's promises. And when something breaks in this system, everything breaks. The banking crisis in Rome was not just a local glitch. It was the first global financial collapse in history, because when Roman bankers lost money, it affected trade throughout the empire. And when trade stopped, the economy stopped too. Imagine this: one bank in Rome cannot return a loan. And within a week, nobody trusts anyone anymore. Merchants stop selling, craftsmen lose orders, and farmers lose customers. And all this is like an avalanche. One push, and the whole system collapses. Interestingly, modern economists still study the Roman crisis. Why? Because we see the same mistakes in it as today: overproduction of money, excessive debt, loss of trust, and attempts to hide problems under the carpet. Only in the modern world, we also have television to present everything beautifully. But the saddest thing is that Rome could not learn lessons. Instead of reforming the system, they continued doing the same thing: printing money, giving loans, and hoping for the best. It's like if a person who constantly falls on ice kept going there every day, only in even slipperier shoes. And here we come to the main question: why do great empires fall? Because they think they can exist forever. Because they start believing in their invincibility. Because they forget that behind every coin is trust, and behind every law is justice. The Roman Empire did not fall from a single blow. It was destroyed by a chain of mistakes, each of which seemed insignificant. But together they created a deadly trap. And modern countries, They make the same mistakes. Only now we also have the opportunity to recur everything, calculate it, and analyze it. But let's get back to our Romans. When the banking system collapsed, it affected everyone, from ordinary citizens to emperors, because when the economy is sick, everyone gets sick. And it doesn't matter how many villas, slaves, or senatorial titles you have. If there is no money, there is no power. And interestingly, some modern crises are direct descendants of Roman mistakes. Remember the financial crisis of 2008. There were also loans without guarantees, also excessive faith in the market, also many beautiful promises and few real assets. And again, trust. When people stopped trusting banks, the system collapsed. Exactly the same way as in Rome. Only now we also have the internet to panic faster. But enough sadness. In the next part, we'll talk about the main lesson of the Roman crisis, why trust is the most valuable thing an economy has, and how we can avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. And here we come to the most important thing. The lesson everyone should remember, because the history of Rome is not just an ancient fairy tale. It's a mirror we should look into every time we think about money, power, and trust. So what was Rome's main sin? It was that they forgot the most important rule of any economy. Trust is more important than gold, because gold is just a metal, and trust is the foundation of everything. Without trust, there are no banks, no trade, no investments, just empty promises and beautiful coins without value. The Romans thought they could build an empire on conquests, money, and cunning tricks, but they forgot the simplest thing. People want justice. When the system works only for the rich, when laws are written for some and enforced for others, sooner or later everything collapses. And you know what's interesting? We still repeat these mistakes today. Modern crises, inflation, loss of trust in banks, we've all been through this before. Only now we also have computers to calculate how bad everything is. But there is good news. We can learn lessons from the past. We can understand that the economy is not just numbers. It's people. And if we want the system to work, it must be honest, transparent, and fair. Rome did not fall because it was weak. It fell because it forgot its own principles, because it started playing God, thinking it could control money as it pleased. But the economy is like nature. You can try to deceive it, but eventually, it always takes its toll. And the final lesson is that nothing is eternal. Neither empires, nor banks, nor even the most powerful economies. Everything has its time. And it's not important how long you hold on, but how you use your time. So next time you hear about a new economic crisis, remember Rome. Remember how one small mistake turned into a huge problem. And ask yourself a question. Are we repeating the same mistakes? Thank you for being with us on this journey through time. If you liked it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And if you want more stories like this, write in the comments what to talk about next. Until next time in the world of history and economics.